They were trying to figure out how to introduce him to technology. And his favorite toy at the time was just a big busy book with no words and just lots of images. And they wanted to digitize it. From there, it was just like very, very clear that they were onto something really unique. I saw the artwork first and had just never seen anything like that for children. It was so bespoke and beautiful. And I realized this is going to be something really interesting. And then we talked a lot more about how all of our kids are going to grow up to have jobs that haven't been invented yet. And we have to prepare them for that world. And technology is not going anywhere. And we have enough rote learning coming out of our ears that there's just so much more we can do for kids. And it was just really clear that we had to start this business, but that it didn't fit into Snowman and what they were building with their video game studio. So we decided to start another company essentially. And that ended up becoming Pok Pok. Our whole mission with the company is to help raise the next generation of creative thinkers through play and ultimately become like the Pixar of play, like that number one digital first kids brand that parents actually love just as much as their kids do. So with that depth and care for the brand comes the parent also encouraging the play. So just as an example, if you're going on a long flight and you're like, okay, kids, how are we going to keep you busy for 10 hours? The parent is more likely to recommend the product that they feel good about rather than letting their kids do the thing that they feel like shit about, but their kid happens to really like. And it's not that kids love Coco Melon more than Pok Pok. It's just that it's harder to put it down. So to get Pok Pok in front of them first is that differentiator, and that's where the parent comes in. And if without the parent buy-in, you don't have brand, you don't have longevity, and you don't have that loyalty.
Welcome to The Peel, where we explore the world's greatest startup stories. I'm your host, Turner Novak, founder of Banana Capital, the venture capital firm with the most addicting podcast. Today, my guest is Melissa Cash, co-founder and CEO of Pok Pok, a Montessori-inspired collection of digital toys that spark creativity and learning through open-ended play. If you've ever worried about your own screen addiction, that concern is even greater for how parents think about their kids' relationship with technology. Melissa and I talk about how it's impossible for kids to avoid screen time, why technology is a tool every kid should learn to use, the landscape of existing media and content options for parents and kids, and how Pok Pok has designed and built a sustainable business around non-addictive games for kids. I recently invested in Melissa and Pok Pok's $6 million Series A, and she shares fundraising advice for other founders, tactics she used to build her network from zero, some of her influencer marketing hacks, and how she's gotten so much press and multiple Apple Design Awards for Pok Pok. My kids have been playing Pok Pok for over 2 years now, and it's fun to both invest and also have Melissa on the show. If you have kids or know someone with kids who might like Pok Pok, check the show notes for a link and code to get 50% off an annual subscription. Let's jump in after a quick word from our sponsors. There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes it a reality. Attio is a CRM built specifically for today's modern company. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, and works for any go-to-market motion, from self-serve to sales-led. It automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your email and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with outdated UX. Someone recently described Attio to me as the linear of CRMs, which if you're in the know, that is high praise. Join 11 Labs, Replicate, Modal, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com, that's attio.com, or tap the link in the show notes and scale your company to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Warp. If you're a founder with employees in multiple states, you know managing state tax compliance is a pain. Warp not only automates state tax compliance, but also offers a user-friendly experience tailored to the unique needs of startups. With their robust in-house team of experts, Warp ensures your startup remains compliant across all 50 states, giving you the peace of mind you need to focus on scaling your business. They also make it easy for startups to provide health benefits for employees, hire international contractors, and even claim R&D tax credits. Hundreds of startups trust Warp to handle their payroll and compliance needs. You can go from zero to payroll live in just 2 days, and their customer support team is friendly and responds super fast. Don't let payroll and compliance hold your startup back. Visit joinwarp.com/peel or tap the link in the description to get started and receive a $1,000 gift card when you run your very first payroll. That's joinwarp.com/peel. Thank you, Warp. Now let's jump in to today's episode. Melissa, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for coming on. Exciting for me because just recently invested in Pok Pok after two members of the household have been probably weekly active users, probably not quite DAUs, but we use it very consistently. And then just invested. I know you just raised the Series A recently that was announced, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And I'm so happy that your kids are weekly users. That's lovely.
Yeah, I would say it's probably like a 0.8 DAU, something like that. Like I said, we're maybe like 4 to 6 days a week on average.
That's very normal and healthy.
Yeah. Well, so for people who don't know, can you maybe talk about what inspired Pok Pok in the first place? And then we can kind of get going from there.
So my two co-founders, who are husband and wife, have two boys. I also have a son, but they had kids first. And their 2-year-old at the time was a lot, as many 2-year-olds are. My son's 2 right now, and he's a lot. And they were trying to figure out how to introduce technology to him while they were also juggling jobs and a newborn baby. And they started looking around in the app store for things that they could share with him, and honestly found nothing that they felt good about. It was like a ton of really addictive and overstimulating, frankly, video games that were not very well designed for young children and not really educational either, or a ton of like pedagogical apps that really just have kids memorizing and regurgitating information instead of really like learning, thinking, dreaming, doing. And so they were like, what about all of those amazing open-ended evergreen toys scattered around the floor of our entire house? Why has no one ever thought to bring those into a digital space? And so that was sort of the first twinge of the idea of let's make something that brings, non-addictive, very creative toys into a digital world for kids.
It's kind of like a Montessori toy rooms brought into an app, basically.
Exactly. We wanted to find a way to bring all of those toys that we all grew up with as kids, adding that Montessori spin on top into a digital world where kids can follow their nose, explore, and experiment without fear of failure, without winning or losing or trying to score points or win or anything like that. It's just like a very kind of sandboxy environment.
Yeah, there's no winning, no losing, no points. There's no in-app purchases either, which is the interesting. That's the thing that we found is, I don't know, we've tried like 100 of these iPad games for kids over the years. And it's always they're almost like casinos. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's like this freemium hack. You get the kids addicted with like Crayola or a Disney character. And then it's suddenly like you need $18 to play to like put a dress on someone. If you don't have kids, that's the thing. It's almost like they use all those in-app hacks and paywalls that you might fall for as an adult. A lot of the games for kids are littered with those strategies. So how did you guys think about just building a game that doesn't have that same issue and still make money also?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're like, we don't want to be annoying to parents. Like, there's nothing more annoying when your kid's coming and like tugging on your shirt and they're like, Mom, and they're bugging you for something, especially, when we lean on a tool like a device for our kids, we do so usually with a feeling of guilt or with this feeling of like, okay, I'm going to let you play on the iPad for 20 minutes because I need time for me. I need to make dinner. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to just breathe for a second. So we never wanted parents to be interrupted by their kids while they were playing. So we had to make it super accessible and easy for young children, even as young as 2, to play all on their own, which meant innately there would be no in-app purchases, no ads, no nonsense.
And there's no words or like language of any kind, right?
None. No. So what you do see in Pok Pok is if you tap a person, they speak gibberish. And that's actually our sound designer, Matt, and his wife, Kathy, doing all of the voices in Pok Pok. And it's all designed to leave room for imagination. So when you tap on a character and they say, hello, I'm going for a walk, maybe that's not what the kid actually intended. So when you tap a character and they mumble something like, blah, 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 like, then the kid can kind of make up the story on their own. And so we decided, from a very early stage, this was going to be totally free of all the like garbage, nonsense, and trash that's already out there on the app stores. And we wanted to make something as pure as our own living room floor is filled with toys. And from a business point of view, we figured, well, this is what parents really want. They want to feel good about screen time. They want that independent play, which is really healthy for their kids, but also amazing for the parent to get that 20-minute break. And they want to feel like they're being a good parent. So for us, it was honestly a no-brainer. We're like, why has no one else done this before?
Yeah, and you kind of, when you open the app, it's sort of, there's a couple different circles you can click on to go into to start playing with something. I think when we first started using it a couple of years ago, there were 6 maybe, and then now there's something like 20. I haven't actually counted, but
Something around there. Yeah, I think we're at 19.
okay. And then, like, for example, there's a dinosaur world where there's just a bunch of these dinosaur creatures, and every single thing in the product is tappable and you can do something with it. It's literally like you're playing with actual toys.
Exactly. And everything in Pok Pok is real. So in the dinosaur toy, for example, it's a kind of slice of the late Cretaceous period. All of the plants, the flora, the fauna, that's all real. You'll notice the dinosaurs don't talk because dinosaurs didn't talk. Like I don't know, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for anthropomorphized animals all over children's entertainment, but we also need like real world stuff. And so the dinosaurs yeah, they can fight each other.
Oh, wait, I've never noticed that
What?
actually.
Oh my God. Well, your daughters are probably playing
They actually, I
a
don't think they've
gentler
ever
way.
done that. Yeah,
That's really funny. We actually did get a bit of backlash for that, but we also got a ton of positive messages being like, thank you for creating this because my kids want to experiment with like conflict, but in a healthy, low stakes way where they're not playing like a first person shooter with real people, but they're seeing like what happens when a T-Rex walks over to a baby brontosaurus. And it's not violent. There's no blood. It's like so gentle. And it's very subtle. I mean, I think a lot of kids don't even necessarily notice it's happened. But we try to just bring reality into Pok Pok, even with the people. So Pok Pok represents people of all body types, genders, family constructs, races. We have everyone in there. And if there's one thing we get a lot of backlash for, it's that.
interesting. Okay. I think my daughters, like in the dinosaur, for example, they will make eggs and they'll have like the family sitting around the nest together.
That's very sweet.
And I think it was interesting when we first met, we were kind of grappling with this whole screen time issue with kids. I think our daughter was 3 or 4 ish, forget exact age, but it was kind of that time where like, okay, she knows that the technology is a thing that she wants to use, and we were like grappling with it. Man, these are not good games. So it's almost like villainized in a way. Like a lot of people say, like, I mean, we had this perspective before we had kids. It was like, oh, we're never going to let our kids sit there in the restaurant on an iPad. But it's almost like it's a tool. Like it's something that kids need to learn how to use really and use responsibly. How have you just thought about like balancing all that stuff?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said before you had kids, you're like, I'm never going to let my kid use a device. Every parent is the best parent until they have children of their own. And then they realize the realities of parenting. And every parent leans on the tools around them. In 2024, that's an iPad, that's technology. 20 years ago, it wasn't the case. And you survive with what you have. And we have these wonderful tools now. And so it's no coincidence that we're leaning on them. We think about it a lot. I mean, this is probably the number one thing we think about in the company is how do we feel about this? And it's why we started the company too, because we felt like crap about screen time always. And there is this huge stigma around it, and it is very taboo in many situations. But I think it really stems from the fact that as adults, we are addicted to technology and we are addicted to our screens. And we're given the stickiest, most addictive tools that exist. Like look at TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. It's all
The Peel podcast. People just can't stop binging
exactly.
it.
Yeah, you with great power comes great responsibility, Turner. We all feel guilty about it. We know we shouldn't be on our phones as much. There are a million apps and products now to get us off of our phones. So it's no coincidence that we feel worried about giving these things to our kids, especially because they're fairly new. So research is young, but I think it comes down to the fact that the technology is not going to go anywhere. 200 years ago, people were scared about their children reading. Oh, what crazy
Books.
ideas are they going to get from books? And then my generation, TV. My TV's going to rot your brain, period. But there's a huge difference between watching 8 hours of Storage Wars and 8 hours of a beautiful David Attenborough documentary about climate change. So from one, you can walk away smarter, more inspired, and feeling good. And one, you walk away with nothing, essentially. And so there's a lot that goes into the content and how it's being used. And I think it's up to the parent, of course, to set boundaries. So when you said your kids are not daily active users, I was almost like happy to hear that because, our kids should be playing outside in the mud and doing other things, right? They shouldn't be on these things all day long. But when there's a time and a place, and when the time and a place comes, we really just want to make sure we have the content that feels like an extension of real play, that's quiet, that's calming, and that's not designed to have them foaming at the mouth, having a meltdown when it's time to take the device away.
Yeah, and maybe if you could go a little bit into that, just how do you design a non-addictive product, whether or not it's for a kid or not? Just like what are the things that you think through to kind of do that successfully?
The biggest thing is making sure that the stimuli is low. So, most content that makes people addicted to it is fast paced, it's loud, it's flashy, it's bright, it's colorful. And when you picture that and you picture kids' IP, they go hand in hand typically. So, we wanted to take the opposite approach. And that really is a testament to my co founder's kind of creative vision here. But we wanted to make something quiet, something with only, we started, I think we had only 6 colors in the app. Now we've bumped up to 12, but they're all tones of those same 6 colors. So it's a very like visually quiet place, auditorily very quiet. First of all, we have no one talking at you or to you. All of the sounds in Pok Pok are hand recorded. So they're designed to be gentle and soft. The whole thing is designed to be slow. Our animations are also slower paced. So if you compare them to, say, Coco Melon, they're, I think, a quarter of the pace of a Coco Melon video. So there's a lot of care that goes into the stimuli to make sure it's just low stimulation. And that in itself plays a huge part. The other big part is the fact that Pok Pok has no levels to beat, no points to score, and nothing to win or lose. So the motivation to play is not extrinsic from beating a level or like, oh, just one more try, just one more apple to collect, just one more thing to do. It is coming from the kid within them. It's why kids love Lego or drawing or trying to like scoop sand forever, because it just comes from deep within them. And they'll stop when they want to stop and come back to it when they want to come back to it. But those two things together really build this as non-addictive as possible, let's say, space for kids to explore without any of those distractions and extrinsic motivators to get in the way.
You make it very almost muted or give it a little bit more simple. But then wouldn't that make it worse business? Because like there's a reason that all these companies have create like Coco Melon. I don't know. I think I saw they're worth, it's within the billions of dollars, right? So technically, isn't this a bad business idea to build something this way?
That's a really good point. And, we thought about that, of course. And I think it's a bad business idea if you are very short-sighted. I think there's a few things that come into play here. First of all is, those really addictive things work. Obviously, like kids and parents and adults even, like we all can get addicted to these things. But everyone kind of hates them, right? Like no one's like, I love TikTok. You kind of hate it, but like you
We're
need to
trying
go
to
on
ban
it.
it right now in the US.
Exactly. There's no like brand affinity and loyalty and love for the product you're using. You're like, oh, I hate my phone. I hate Instagram. I hate all of it. But like you feel like you have to use it. And so we are playing the long game with Pok Pok. So our whole mission with the company is to help raise the next generation of creative thinkers through play and ultimately become like the Pixar of play, like that #1 digital first kids brand that parents actually love just as much as their kids do. So with that depth and care for the brand comes the parent also encouraging the play. So just as an example, if it's time, if you're going on a long flight and you're like, okay, kids, how are we going to keep you busy for 10 hours? The parent is more likely to recommend the product that they feel good about rather than letting their kids do the thing that they feel like shit about, but their kid happens to really like. And it's not that kids love Coco Melon more than Pok Pok. It's just that it's harder to put it down. So to get Pok Pok in front of them first is that differentiator, and that's where the parent comes in. And if without the parent buy-in, you don't have brand, you don't have longevity, and you don't have that loyalty. We think a lot about retention. I mean, obviously we have to build a business here too. So we needed to make sure that Pok Pok was still interesting, still super fun, and had a lot of educational value to keep kids coming back to it, even though it is so low stimulation. And I think that comes with the diversity of what we have in the app. So kids get sick of stuff every 2 seconds, as you know. So we needed to make sure that there's a massive collection of toys and everything can be played with in a million different ways. And so there's so much to do and explore and find that even though it is low stimulation and it's very gentle, there's still something always kind of piquing a child's interest. So it's not that it's boring. It's just that it's not screaming at you like some of the other types of kids content out there. So from a business point of view, it works great because kids like it, but we also have buy-in from the parent, which is very, very rare in digital tools and content for kids. Usually the parents just tolerate it. They don't actually like it. And so your kind of shelf life on that is very short.
Yeah, that's a good point. The parents are basically the customer, but the kids are the user, I guess, if that's a way to frame it. The retention point's really, really important too. I remember when I when I first met you a couple of years ago, you had kind of just launched the app, and one of my things, I just don't know if people are actually going to stick around and use this. Like it's like the opposite of what you generally would want to do. So I had my daughter start playing with it, and she just kept using it, and it was like interesting. Wouldn't have expected that. Like, I mean, I guess you'd hope, obviously, but like, it's really interesting. So I think the retention's huge in that regard, just in terms of like, if it's a subscription business, like the way the business model, people pay. I don't even know what we pay. It's like not a lot of money. It's like $12 a month, maybe 15 a month, something like that.
It's
What's the
much less.
pricing? Oh, okay.
It's funny. I'm glad you think that that's quote nothing because we're doing some price testing right now. So I'm going to come back to you. We'll talk about that later. But
Okay. Well, we'll probably upgrade to the annual once it gets too expensive monthly.
oh my gosh, you're not on the annual Turner. Your kids have been already using it for years. What are you waiting for?
Oh, so this is an interesting question. How do you figure out your annual pricing? Because usually someone will have monthly, it's let's say $10 a month. Annual, you would think 10 times 12 is 120, but no one ever has the annual pricing. It's always a discount. So how do you figure out your annual pricing?
We actually figure out annual first, and then we figure out monthly after. And that's because the annual subscribers are way more valuable to us. We get more cash up front, and we have a full year to engage them, build a relationship, and keep them for their second year. So we think about the annual price first, and then we just calculate the monthly backwards. So we'll make annual always be a discount on the monthly. So if you pay monthly for 12 months, obviously it's still cheaper to subscribe annually. And how do we think about the annual price? Honestly, Pok Pok is priced on the lower end in terms of competition at the moment. Even though it's a very premium Montessori critically acclaimed product, we knew when we first started the company, we were going to market with something completely different than everybody else was doing for kids. So we didn't want price to be the reason people didn't try it. So we started a little lower to make sure that the barrier to entry wasn't the cost, that it was like, this is interesting. This is a little weird. This is different than anything I've seen before, but let's give it a go.
Yeah, there's no Elsa characters in here. There's no like,
Exactly. So we started a little lower on price, but now, like you already mentioned, we've multiplied the content in the app maybe like tenfold. It's been, we've grown so much, and we've also learned a lot about our users and our customers who, as you mentioned, are different. So we're continuously price testing also in different markets to see what the final, I mean, I don't know if there ever is a final price, but like what the right price for now is. But we do just try to think about recurring value for the family, because especially in households where you already are paying for multiple subscriptions for, let's say, streaming platforms, and then you have a bunch of other things going on, like we want to make sure Pok Pok is really valuable for them. And so right now it's $45.99 US a year, but we are planning to raise that in the coming months.
so if I'm listening to this and I'm like, man, that sounds interesting, I better sign up before you raise prices.
Today, don't hesitate. There's a free trial, so no stress.
Okay, maybe if we can figure this out later, but we'll throw it in the show notes, just like a link to get something if you sign up. I don't know if you do like special deals, but
Totally, yeah, we can happy to shoot everyone a deal. If you'll throw in a banana, then everyone can get like 20% off in a banana.
well, so digging in a little bit more, it's kind of interesting because you think about the retention and like the in-app purchases. Like usually someone would say make more money, launch like a new game or launch like a new thing to purchase in the app, You think of it more as, because it's a subscription, you want people to continue coming back. You just want to keep adding new features, or new toys, basically, new worlds for the kids to explore in the game. Is that a fair way to think about how you kind of just think through the general business model? It's just continue to launch new experiences for the kids.
Exactly. It's just adding value all the time for the kid and the parent because we have this unique problem where our user isn't our customer. And this is actually a problem that radiates through so many other industries, especially in B2B companies. So I think it's often very forgotten that when your user isn't your customer, everything is more complicated, but there's so many cool things that you can do when that's the case. So we're always thinking about like what's the value for the kid, what's the value for the parent, and where's the overlap? Because if the parent doesn't know that the kid loves all the new updates, then they're going to unsubscribe. And if the kid doesn't care, doesn't find them, if their parent maybe doesn't mention it, then they can also become tired. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, and it's probably the biggest challenge with Pok Pok is connecting the parent with the kid and the parent back to us. Because the pro is you don't need your parent to play with Pok Pok. A 2-year-old can do it all on their own. The con of that is you don't need a parent. So if your 2-year-old is savvy enough to find the iPhone or iPad, pick it up, turn it on, the parent may never even notice what they're doing. So yeah, we have a lot of unique challenges in that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about your marketing too is it's not screenshots of the game. It's more so families and kids enjoying, like, you're more like seeing their reactions and seeing them play, because you're ultimately selling it to the parents. A couple seconds like video of the game, they're gonna be like, this doesn't look, like, this looks lame, like, this looks boring, like, it's like, but then when you see for a kid watching them play, you're like, oh, the kid's really into it, he's having fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so important. Like if you show up a 40-year-old parent at a kid's game, they're gonna be like who cares? They're not gonna be like, oh, awesome, you can like drive cars into a car wash. Sick. Like
Yeah, you can scrub the soap and the sponge on the car to clean off the mud over and over again.
exactly. But kids love that, of course. Like one of the biggest things that shocked us is like what kids actually do in Pok Pok sometimes. I'm just
Yeah, what
like,
do they do?
what is even happening? And so
What's like
with
the
we have
most, in terms of like the data? What's like the most common use case, or a couple top activities that kids do?
well, the town is our most popular toy. It's the one with the car on the icon, and my son's actually really into it right now too. And it's very funny to see. So we have the toys heat mapped, so we can see like where kids are and what they're doing. And it's so funny because there are little pockets where they tend to lean. Like my son will use the car wash for 30 minutes straight. He'll just bring vehicle upon vehicle upon vehicle through the car wash.
Because you can go and find the fire station and pull a fire truck on the other side of town and bring it to the car wash and put it in.
Totally. Same with the garbage disposal. So there's a garbage dump and a recycling center. And it's the same. If you put those trucks in, they like dump garbage or recycling and then move on. And you can put anything in there. You can also put like a digger through or a fire truck through. And that is like some of the most interesting play that we see, which is so cool because kids do love that repetition, especially the youngest children. It's really important for their brain development and for them to understand cause and effect and problem solving. So it's a really cool one. But we also see kids just wandering around looking for mail and they'll like find all the letters, and we've hidden a million Easter eggs in the town, but they'll just collect them. Or we see kids just line up cars by color, and that's their play. And so the whole beauty of it is like they can do whatever they want. The limit is not in the app, the limit is within themselves. So it's quite funny to see that. But again, when it comes to marketing, the parent, like we don't get that as parents. Like we've lost all of our senses of wonder. We're old. we don't see the fun in that the way kids do. So we have to show parents the value add for them, which is feeling safe, knowing their kids doing something healthy, and that yes, it's using technology, but it's doing so in a really mindful and beautiful way.
So then, in terms of the more the landscape of other games kids could play, I mean, there's a bunch of other toy companies, a bunch of other apps. What do you think is kind of one of the big differentiators? Maybe you've already explained this, but
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, of course, is the type of play Pok Pok offers. It's this open ended real like creative space where kids can do whatever they want. And most children's apps have levels, menus, goals. They're sort of either like an academic workbook that's been digitized where you go through, you match the circle to the circle and you move on to the next thing, and it takes you through that like rote learning like you would be doing in a classroom just digitally. Or you've got the video game, which is like you've got your 10 classic games for kids and they've just been given a different IP and a different packaging. So
Yeah, they
that's
just
like
get
memory
reskinned
and
with, yeah.
matching and yeah, so and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things, but what we know from research and many years of working on this is that kids learn best through play and experimentation and pushing the limits. So when they're just trying to memorize and spit something out or they're just going through the motions, it's fine, but there's so much more that can be happening. So I think the biggest moat for Pok Pok actually is the fact that the content and the play that's going on is as close as you'll get on a screen to what you get again, like on the floor of your house when your kids are, you know, opening a bag of spaghetti and spilling it all over the floor. Like that is such a cool learning moment. But as a parent, you're like, Jesus Christ, like, why is this all over my kitchen?
Yeah.
I think that's really the biggest differentiator. And then when you add on top like the aesthetics, the quiet, the beautiful art and sound, like that just really kind of drives the whole thing home.
And then where do you think this goes over the longer term? Like what other kind of things are you going to do? Like there's 19 toy rooms right now. A couple of years from now, 10 years from now, like what all are you guys kind of thinking about?
It's a great question. So, for the immediate future, we're going to be launching on Android later this year, which is something we've been holding off on for the last 2 years. So, we're really excited for that.
Why did you hold off so long?
So, there are a few reasons, but the biggest one is we really wanted to nail kind of like every aspect of finding product market fit on one platform before diversifying. Because launching on Android, it's a very complex move in the sense that like you have way more devices to support. We have a really high quality, like beautifully made app that can be difficult to port properly to some of those older Android devices, which are the ones that kids are actually using. They're not using like the newest Pixel, whatever. So that came into play. We also know from like an economic standpoint that Apple users tend to pay more. So revenues tends to be about 30% higher on iOS than Android. And when we started the company, we wanted to focus on that so that we could really build a healthy business from the get-go and then bring it over to Android later. And then being Apple exclusive was also a really nice strategic move. We've had a lot of love and support from Apple over the years. We're the first children's app ever in history to win an Apple Design Award and an App Store Award for our cultural impact. So all of those things are not because we're exclusive to Apple, but I do think that it doesn't hurt that we were exclusive to Apple. So there are really a bunch of reasons. And the last thing really is we're a very small team. So we're 20 people today, but when we started the company, we were four and we didn't have enough technical bandwidth to do both. And so over the years, we could have done it, but we wanted to really just stay focused and make one platform work really well so that when we do launch on Android, we can go from like 0 to 100. We're not going from like 0 to 5 to 10 to 20 and work our way back up.
Yeah, and speaking about all the awards and all that kind of stuff you guys have won, even pre Pok Pok, a lot of the team members have, I don't know, it's like a pretty prolific resume. I know that's it's not really public, but it's like nine figures or 9 digits of kind of total downloads on the team of all their different products that they've built over the years. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really lucky. So we actually have 5 founders at Pok Pok. So Ryan and Jordan are also the founders of Snowman, who created Alta's Adventure and Skate City and a bunch of other really amazing mobile games, sort of in the heyday of mobile gaming. Between the 5 of us, we have garnered over 100 million downloads worldwide. And honestly, when we started Pok Pok, I had zero experience in in the apps and games business. I came from Disney. I came from marketing at startups. Like this was not my world. So partnering with those guys has been incredible and gave us a big boost in terms of knowledge, connections, and really kind of getting going. So yeah, we're very proud to be such a diverse founding team. And yeah, it's a cool group.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Disney. I know there's a story there. I don't know where you want to start the story, but I think it's probably interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. So I'm Canadian. I moved to Germany when I was 22, I think, for love, of course.
Was this post college?
Yeah, this is post college. I graduated. I had studied in Europe for a while and fallen in love with my now husband. And I thought I'm going to move to Europe and see what happens. I'll give it a few months. I ended up staying for over 6 years, and when I first got there, I spoke zero German, but I was able to get a job at this like teeny tiny, I'm not even going to call it a startup, but like a small business run by an American and her husband. And they were, it was really cool actually. It was like a fashion business. It was very interesting. But the sort of short version there is I was basically an intern, I suppose. And they asked me to go to Berlin from Munich, where I was living, for a trade show, like a conference. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. And so they gave me literally cash for this business trip. And they gave me an envelope of cash. I lived in the safest neighborhood in Munich. They lived 10 minutes away by bike. I literally I'm cycling home from work. They've given me the envelope of cash. I'm about the next day I'm to fly to Berlin, and this cash is everything. It's my hotel, my food, any other additional expenses. And yeah, I'm like, I'm just gonna stop on the way home and quickly grab groceries. And I make a pit stop. And while I'm at the store, I got mugged. Like, luckily, I didn't know it had happened until I was going to pay for my groceries and realized my stuff was gone. But the envelope was taken. So my whole wallet was actually taken.
So someone pickpocketed you?
Yeah, essentially.
Wow.
So, and it was crazy because it was like the middle of the day in the middle of the week. And I was leaving early because I was going to go to the airport. So it was weird. Like the store was empty. It was like a bunch of grandmothers and like old, like it was, I still to this day don't know who did it. I didn't, like, I tried to report it. The store didn't have any cameras. So I lost all the money. Also, I spoke no German. So like when I was trying to report it, I was just all flustered, and I ended up texting my boyfriend at the time and was like, I don't know what to do. I just lost like 2,000 euros. I didn't have 2,000 euros. Like I just moved there, was like a poor post grad in a new country. And I was like, shit, like how am I going to go on this business trip? They're trusting me. I was going by myself. So, anyways, I end up like sorting myself out. The sort of short version is that I ended up just telling my boss what happened, and they were like, "Oh my god, like don't worry about it. We'll just give you more. Like just it's okay." They're like, "Just pay for what you can while you're there." I'm like, "I have enough money to pay for my trip, but," and they're like, "We'll just reimburse you." So they were very, very kind. Even their children had collected like coins in an envelope for me. We're like, "It's okay." It was very sweet. I was so grateful. But what's crazy is when I got to Berlin, I was like really on guard because I just been mugged. So yeah, I was just really paying attention, and I was, I finished up on my conference there. It all went well, and I was waiting for the bus to get back to the airport. I probably would have Ubered or taxied at the time, but again, I was limited on funds at the moment. So I'm waiting for the bus, and I'm like really aware of my surroundings. And I see this woman, and she starts coming to approach me, and I'm just kind of like, okay, like, what's going to happen here? And she just goes, "Hey, do you know what time the bus is coming?" And she spoke English, which I thought was surprising. So we got to talking. It turns out she worked for Disney, and we really just hit it off. We spent the entire time flying, like taking the bus, then getting on the plane and flying back to Germany.
Which she sat next to you on the plane?
No, she didn't sit next to me on the plane, but I just kept bumping into her. And it was funny because I was telling her, like she was from New York, it turned out. She worked for Disney in Germany. And as my little side hustle while I was doing this internship, I was giving bicycle tours of Munich in English. And I mentioned that to her, and she was like, "Oh, you know what? I have some family coming from New York. Maybe we'll come on your tour." So we exchanged information. She gave me her card. I'll never forget it because it had a Mickey Mouse embossed on it, which I just thought was like the coolest thing. And a couple weeks later, she showed up on my tour. I took her on the city, and then she said, "You know what? I might have a job for you." And about 2 months later, I was sitting in an office next to her and stayed at Disney for about 5 years designing physical products for babies and toddlers. So it was just this like crazy moment of like almost failing, losing all my money, getting to Berlin, meeting this woman. And it really just taught me like you never know who you're going to meet that might change your life. And so just be open and talk to everybody everywhere. And so that was really my first experience with that. And then it kind of continued to trickle through my career. And I'm still in touch with her to this day. She was an amazing mentor and friend.
Amazing. What kind of products did you make or toys are you allowed to talk about at Disney?
I made a lot of non-toy things. So I made a lot of baby bottles, clothing, strollers. Yeah, I actually like my son is using stuff that I had made at Disney and kept, like blankets, stuff like that. So there's a lot of sort of like home decor, accessories, that kind of stuff.
Oh, interesting. That's where Disney juices a lot of their LTV on customers, right?
Yes, it really is. And I have to say, there's such a loyalty there because there was a time where I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is a great job, and it's very romanticized to work at these big entertainment companies. But I also remember as a kid, like I had these piglet pajamas, and when I wore them, I felt like I could literally do anything. Like I just felt so powerful. And I was like, you know what? If I can give that feeling to a kid through these like Mickey shoes or whatever I was working on, like that's pretty amazing. And it really gave me the first taste on like a visceral level of like the power of brand and building it with young children while they're so small and being welcomed into a family is a big deal. And so I think when we started Pok Pok, we thought a lot about that and how can we build trust and brand with families when kids are really, really young and hopefully grow with them for years to come.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Like I just think about my kids, the random things that they just get so much joy out of and or that makes them feel so powerful. Like a dress that has a certain character on it and it's probably cost about 30 cents to make that dress. But it's like it has so much meaning to them.
You know how when you like buy a new workout shirt or something and you're like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna go for a run tonight because like you bought the shirt. It's like certain things really do make you feel more powerful. And whether that's a clothing item or a brand new MacBook or whatever the thing is that kind of like gets your juices flowing, I do feel like there's a lot of power there. And so it can be very laughable to think about, but I think there's a lot of really like defining moments in childhood that happen through product, brand, and all of these other companies that you let into your home.
Anything just in your childhood growing up that you think kind of has defined maybe you, Pok Pok?
I had a really creative upbringing, like anything went in our house. Like you could do whatever you wanted when it came to dreaming or doing, or if we were like, my brother and I would be like, hey, we're going to make potions out of like soap and garbage or like whatever we can find. And like, we're going to sell it on the street. Like whatever we wanted to do, my parents were like, yeah, let's do it. Like, how can we help? And they never held us back. So I think even when I remember my brother was saying he was going to be an NBA player and he was like 5'6" or something, like it was just not going to happen. And my parents were like, yeah. And I told them I was going to be a professional actress. And they were like, okay, we'll make it happen. How can we help? Like anything we wanted, they were game for. And I think it really defined our ability to think really beyond the scope of what other people thought was the limit. So it made us almost like delusional that anything was possible. But I think as a founder, if you meet a founder who's not delusional to some degree, I think they're probably not right for the job because you have to believe so fundamentally that what you are doing can actually change the world that you'll do anything to make it happen. And so I think just growing up with that mentality really defined who I am and made it possible for me to see through the obstacles, get through the really hard days of running this company and just keeping going because I knew that someone was going to be there being like, fuck yeah, let's do it no matter what.
Yeah. And then were there any moments during Disney where you feel like you, I don't know, got similar, monumental, very memorable experiences?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that stands out to me the most is when I came up with this idea that I was designing shoes with Iron Man on them. And we had just like, Disney had recently acquired Marvel and it was like a very big deal. And, anyways, I was working on these shoes and I thought it would be really cool to have the superheroes kind of like come at you. Like Marvel, there was this like, Marvel with his fist in the air kind of, or not Marvel, Iron Man, sorry. Oh my God, I sound like such a boomer. Iron Man, Iron Man like flying through the air with his fist. So I thought it would be cool to make like a flip book out of the tongue on a shoe so that it would like kids could like, when they fiddle with their shoes and like flip the tongue, there would be like a bunch of Ironmans like flipping and it would be like he's kind of like flying. And I just thought this would be such a cool thing. So it's hard to describe, but I swear it was very cool. Or at least my like 25-year-old self thought it was very cool.
So it's like one of those flip books where there's like 100 pages, you flip them, and each page is slightly different. So it's like a little animation.
Exactly. But this is the tongue of your sneaker.
Okay, the tongue of a shoe. Okay.
So when you like flip your tongue, I don't know if you ever like fidget with your shoes when you were a kid, but like will you like flip the tongue and it would be like flipping 10 pages of a book and that little mini book would be Iron Man like flying. So
Did it work? Like, were you able to create it?
so I had the design, like the initial plan, and I remember showing it to someone on my team. She wasn't my boss directly, but she was like definitely way higher up than I was. And the first thing she said was, everything you make at Disney is owned by Disney. And it was the first time I realized I had made something really interesting that they were like, oh shit. And they realized like, and they really wanted to make sure that I knew that whatever I made there didn't belong to me, that it was actually Disney's. And I had created something novel and cool. And the shoe never got made while I was working there. But it was that clicked for me where I was like, no matter what I do at this company, it's not going to be mine. So it just kind of stuck with me in the back of my head. It wasn't a tipping point, but when I ended up moving back to Canada and meeting my co-founders and thinking about like, should we start this company? That really like stuck out to me because I realized, if whatever I do here, it's going to be mine and I'll have full control over it, or like control of my co-founders. Of course, I'm not crazy, but like, it would be something that I could own. And that was a really interesting moment for me.
Interesting. And then how did you meet like all the co-founders? There's five of you. I haven't met everyone yet. How did that all kind of come about? Were you in Germany? Did you move back first? What was the order of operations?
I moved back to Toronto, and my older brother, Ryan, is the founder of Snowman with his childhood best friend, Jordan, who I've known since I was 3. So when I came back to Toronto, they were about to launch Alto's Odyssey, which is a very successful mobile game now. And they asked if I could help do a bit of PR for the launch. And Ryan and I had worked together over the years, whether that be like a newspaper route or whatever. And we always knew that we shouldn't work together because we're really, really close siblings. And we're like, if we work together, that's all we're ever going to talk about. So we both agreed this is super temporary. So I'm like, I'll help you for 3 months and then I'm going to go get a job. I had a job lined up at a startup to like start and build a marketing department. It was very cool, Series A startup, very excited for it. And I went there. But the whole time I was thinking about this other little idea, which had come up when 2 of Ryan and Jordan's freelancers flew over from Belgium, and they had this little idea to make a digital busy book for their son. Like I mentioned, they were trying to figure out how to introduce him to technology, and his favorite toy at the time was just a big busy book with no words and just lots of images. And they wanted to digitize it. So they asked Ryan and Jordan, hey, do you guys mind if we work on this on the weekends? It'll just be a hobby project. We're just going to make it for our son, but it could be a conflict because, it's technically kind of like a video game. And they were like, no, we love this idea. You should talk to Melissa. Like she just worked at Disney and maybe she can help you. And then from there, it was just like very, very clear that they were onto something really unique. I saw the artwork first and had just never seen anything like that for children. It was so bespoke and beautiful and something I would actually hang in my house as an adult. And I realized this is going to be something really interesting. And then we talked a lot more about how all of our kids are going to grow up to have jobs that haven't been invented yet. And we have to prepare them for that world. And technology is not going anywhere. And we have enough rote learning coming out of our ears that there's just so much more we can do for kids. And it was just really clear that we had to start this business but that it didn't fit into Snowman and what they were building with their video game studio. So we decided to start another company essentially. And that ended up becoming Pok Pok. So we all very, very passionate about it, but at the end of the day, it just felt like, something we kind of had to do. And, 5 founders is a lot, but it works for us. Ryan and Jordan are really still invested in Snowman, but they're also really present in Pok Pok and help with many, many things over here. And Esther and her husband, Matthias, are kind of our heads of creative and lead the product charge.
So then what was kind of the first steps on just getting the company started and just the first couple months? Anything interesting that happened?
A lot of interesting things. I I think the biggest thing was trying to figure out what to do, honestly. It was like,
Yeah, because you never started a company, right?
no, for any founder listening who wants to maybe do something and has no idea how to start or where to start, like, I can let this will maybe make you feel better, which is, yeah, I had no idea what to do. Like, I had a lot of work experience. I'm a smart person, but I never started my own company. I knew nothing really about the apps and games business. So I went to Ryan and Jordan and we decided I'm going to go through like a crash course. I sort of became like, I moonlit as head of operations for Snowman, helped them launch some games, helped them scale their team. I think we like tripled the team size in a year. And I just went nuts trying to like learn that business really, really well so that I could take everything I learned and bring it to Pok Pok. And during that time, we hired two people, like an artist and a developer, to help start building and working on Pok Pok with Esther and Mateus. After that first year of what I'll call like exploration, where like I learned the industry and they made like the first MVPs of the product, we then decided to scale up. We raised a pre-seed, we hired a couple of people and really like got to work. And that pre-seed was interesting. I think, we were in a very comfortable position thanks to the support of Snowman at the time. So we didn't have a gun to our head to raise money, but I really wanted to practice before we actually really needed it. And so that pre-seed round was my way of learning, how do you raise money, what does this world look like, and it was really successful. We raised in 2 weeks. It was so quick. We got very lucky. We got some amazing investors in, and that really was also like a crash course in how to raise venture capital. And then when it was time to raise our seed, I was ready, and now just did a Series A as well. So I think you learn more and more with each step, but you have to just kind of start anywhere and figure it out.
Well, I guess because you've kind of raised money a couple times, different phases of like where the business was at traction wise. Any like learnings or frameworks you think you'd share with people who never done it before, or maybe the most actionable things that you've kind of learned in terms of fundraising and why you think you're able to do it a couple different times?
Yeah, I think the in the earlier stages, I would say the best thing about raising money in the early stages is you're raising on a story. So if you don't have any metrics, all that matters is your idea and you. And those are two things that are really easy, in my opinion, to curate and build because one is you. No one knows you better than you. And the other thing is your idea. And if you have a great idea and you are convinced that your idea is going to work, that's already, I would say, like three-quarters of the battle. It gets a lot more difficult when you actually have numbers and sales and metrics, because that's when you're looked at with a whole different, you're held against a different level of standard, and people look at your entire deal in a very different way. So that pre-seed was really easy because I'm a really good storyteller. I have a great network. I can sell myself well, and I knew that our company was a fantastic idea and made a lot of sense from like a business point of view, but also from a problem solving point of view. I think in the later stages, it's all finesse. Like network, as I'm sure you know, Turner, is everything. And so I'm always fundraising. Like, yeah, we just closed our Series A, but I'm always fundraising. Like, you're never done, because it's the entire business of fundraising is relationships. So just like I met that woman on the street and ended up working for Disney, like I'm constantly on the lookout for interesting people who I can help, but who can also help me. And I think you just never know who those people are going to be. And so what I learned really quickly when we did that seed round was that was the really foundation for my network building. And I spent the last few years cultivating it. And so when it came to raise a Series A, it was much faster, easier, and I would say less stressful actually, because I had already known a lot of these people and I had a reputation. And so I think if you hate networking, if you're not an outgoing person, and if you don't like getting to know people, frankly, then I think it's really tough. It's still very possible, but you have to push yourself a lot further. Like for me, I love the pitching phase because you just get to like meet interesting people and hear about their lives and their funds and what they're doing and why they are passionate about it. And you get to share your story and what you love doing. And it's kind of like dating. I don't know. I find it really fun. But I think my biggest advice to anyone is like, it's never too early to build your network. And it's probably the most important thing.
What do you think worked best just for you in terms of like your process for doing it? Like, if that sounds scary, building my network. There's some people that's probably like, this sounds miserable. I hate networking. How do you kind of think through, or how would you advise someone that's maybe not quite as excited or doesn't know where to start with building their network?
I would say start where you're comfortable. So think of the few things that you really, really love and care about that are related to your business. So for Pok Pok, just as an example, like I really am passionate about play in general, like how kids play, why it's important, how they learn through it. So just going to events, reading up on the latest trends and reports, and like just staying in the know will naturally lead you to people. So let's say you read an article in Forbes about play. I don't know. Email the journalist. Just be like, hey, I love what you wrote. Thank you for making this known to the world. And just slowly start sharing your appreciation of others. So that's one really easy hack, is just like if someone puts out a tweet or a thread that's really interesting, not don't only comment, DM them and say like, wow, I really love this. It really hit home for me. I've saved it. I'm going to look back on this. Like, what else are you into? And just see if there's any common ground, or share something with them. You know, you posted about this. I actually just posted about that. You might find it interesting. And just really try to share what you care about. If you don't care about it, it's just so boring and terrible. So like, now you have to actually like it. And if you're somebody who enjoys going to events, I would always encourage people to do that. I always try to do something at least once a month and just put myself out there. And for me, it's very where my passions lie outside of like the Pok Pok ecosystem is just in women and underrepresented founders. So I'm regularly trying to be part of those networks. And so at least just going to like a female founders coffee, usually like you won't hit it off with everyone and that's totally fine, but you might get one contact who 6 months later you may notice is connected to the one VC at the top of your list, and they happen to be your way in. So you just kind of never know. And then the other thing is just to surround yourself with multipliers. So if you personally hate all of this and everything I just said sounds like shit, then find a co-founder or find someone else in your network who maybe you don't even work with, who's just really good at it and loves it, and try tagging along and let them like drive the bus, but just go for the ride. Because I think it's exhausting and it can be very, very draining, even on like an extrovert who enjoys it like me. So I would say the easiest way is through that like passive, more like digital outreach. And if you can stomach the in-person stuff, then I would try to go. And maybe one last thing is there's always a Slack group, like for any industry, for any niche. So if you can find the one that's most relevant to you, that's also a really can be a waste of time, but can also be a really valuable place to meet interesting people.
How do you get the most out of the events or the Slack groups? Those are two totally different things. But what's your approach to make sure? Because there's some people that will say, "Oh, you're a seed stage founder. Why are you going to these networking events?" Or someone could say, like, "You're in all these silly Slack groups or something." So, how would you recommend somebody approach those things to actually get tangible progress or traction or something out of those, aside from just going to them for the sake of going?
You have to put in what you want to get out of it. So if you're in a Slack group, like I've been in so many dead Slack groups where nothing happens and I just end up leaving. But if you're in one where there's like a spark of action going on, be helpful, number one. If you help three people, then they're so much more likely to help you when you need help. Or if you see somebody post something about their company, give them a shout out. Be like, congrats, this is awesome. Just make your name visible in the threads so that people recognize you, and go read people's intros and find, a couple of them that sound interesting to you, DM them, see if they want to hop on a quick call, get to know them. Maybe one out of those five people will actually be interesting, but it takes time. Like it's definitely a bit of a grind, but I think you're not going to get into it what you don't put into it. So I definitely learned that very quickly. Is like if I'm not active in these places, then I'm not going to get anything out of them. And that's honestly fine. Sometimes I just don't have time. Like I'm a mom, I'm running a company. I don't have time to be like pitter pattering on Slack every day. But there are a couple groups that are really valuable that I am in. That one is Hampton, founded by Sam Parr and Joe Spicer, and the other is Venture Backed Moms. And those two are my personal favorites. They're both you have to be invited, you have to apply, and Hampton you have to pay for. But because of that, the caliber is just so much stronger. So I think I would also focus on the paid or application only groups, because that's where people actually want to be. They're not just like sliding in for fun and it's free. And then in in-person events, my biggest hack is wear something crazy.
Whoa. Okay. Was not expecting that.
I usually try to wear something where people are like, whoa.
Have you worn that? I've seen you wearing that suit jacket in conference picture things before. Have you? Is that true?
Yeah, so I have my notorious yellow blazer, which I wear a lot because and I have like other versions of it, of course, but it works so well. It seems like the dumbest thing if someone's like, wear something bright. But like, I cannot tell you how many times I walk into a room and people actually turn their heads because I'm just wearing a yellow shirt. It's like literally this most simple thing you can do. But at 90% of these events, everyone is wearing black, navy, or gray. So if you wear any other color, people will literally just see you with their eyes and be like, interesting. And then they'll be able to track you throughout the room. I was recently at the Game Developers Conference. I was wearing my yellow jacket. I went to a big, big event hosted by one of the most famous VCs in the world. I walked in, I was wearing my yellow jacket, and there was one other person wearing a color, and everyone else was wearing black or neutral. And it was actually crazy to see. Like, I had 4 or 5 people come up to me and be like, I love your jacket. Oh my God. Like, actually saw you 2 days ago on the street. Was that you? And I was like, yeah. Like it's so crazy, but it works really well, especially if you get lucky and you end up giving a talk at an event, wear something memorable. So after the talk, people can find you and come talk to you. Again, the simplest thing, but everyone kind of just looks the same. So if you can make yourself stand out visually, it's like 80% of the battle, and it's the perfect conversation starter. If you're at an event and you're just like, oh, I don't know anyone here, everyone's wearing a lanyard, I don't want to talk to people, I'm just not in the mood, go find someone who you can compliment something about them. Like, hey, I love your shoes. Those are really cool. And then just like start the conversation from there because it can be really hard. And also remember, everyone else feels just as awkward as you do. So if you are the one to go talk to them, usually they're super relieved. Like, oh, thank God someone's talking to me. Now I don't have to stand here pretending to do something on my phone. So we've forgotten because of technology, but it's people love human connection and really appreciate being engaged with, I think, for the most part.
Okay, you're at a conference, you walk up to someone, you're trying to make it easy for them by you say something. How do you usually approach those so it's not like super lame and it's actually fun?
I think the big thing is like getting people to talk about themselves is really easy usually. So, and that will give me ammo. So I just ask them a bunch of questions about themselves, like where are they from? But like it sounds so simple, but like everyone loves to talk about themselves. And if you give them the opportunity, usually they'll say something in the first 2 minutes that you can kind of bite on and go down a rabbit hole with them. Sometimes you're just like, nope, this is a wet sponge and you just move on. But I think trying to find like a genuine connection and I wouldn't focus on the business of it all. I would really just focus on like meeting the person and getting to know them because like just as an example, I was at WWDC 2 weeks ago and surrounded by execs from Apple and some of the best developers in the world. And it was lunch, there was a bunch of tables, nobody knows each other. I was alone. It's like, "Oh my God, where am I going to sit? There's no free spot." I see this table. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I sit here? A couple women like scatter. A guy moves over. I sit down. I start eating. I turn over. The woman kind of looks at me and I'm like, oh, hey, like, how's your lunch? Good. We start talking. Turns out she's been subscribed to Pok Pok for 2 years and she's a very high up executive at Apple. But we didn't even get to any of that for half an hour because we were just talking about a million other things that were really cool. And now I have her direct email if I need something. So like I think building a relationship based on just the person and then worrying about the business part later really matters and can be helpful because I mean, we're all just people at the end of the day. Like, yeah, you're a VC and yeah, I'm a founder and we have our worth and our connections, but we're also just like two people who are interesting. And so I feel like if you focus on that, then the business part will come if it's meant to.
That's true. We're both just getting over being sick.
Yeah, we have so much in common.
So another thing I wanted to hit on, you talked about, sitting with all these executives at Apple. You've won a ton of I think you won like Game of the Year award or something like you like not just you, but there's the whole co-founding team. You guys have won so many of these game and design awards and app awards. How do you do that? Like as a founder, if I'm like, how the heck do I like get an award from Apple? Like how have those come about in just so many times?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, it's an annoying answer, and I apologize for this, but there isn't like one way to do it. And you can't apply for them. I think the first thing you have to do, honestly, is just make something amazing. Cause like Apple does not get out of bed from mediocrity. So you have to make something incredible. And then you have to make sure that they know it exists. So it's sort of like two steps. The first thing, the hardest part is to make the really amazing thing. And then once you've made something that you feel is really amazing, then you need them to notice you. And there are over 2 million apps out there. So it is very hard to get noticed. But I think there are a lot of ways to do it. Press is one of them. I think one of the most accessible ways because you really can't just call up and ask to speak to John Galenzi, who's like the head of design evangelism, and be like, hey, can I have an Apple Design Award?
Yeah, talk to
So
Tim Cook, just be like, hey, Tim, like,
exactly. Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, you can try, but nothing will happen. And you should also know like Apple, from what I understand, has whole departments dedicated to finding these gems every year. So they are looking like they want to find the best of the best. But of course, like the better business you're doing and the more well known you are, like that does really help. So if you have the ability to network with folks from Apple in any way, whether that's through like your local country or their business development team, that's obviously helpful. But I think the bigger thing is to just make something really, really amazing and try to get as much heat kind of drummed up around it as possible. So like with Pok Pok, we won an Apple Design Award 2 weeks after we launched the company, which was it was like the biggest shock to me ever.
oh, so you didn't even like they just were like picked you like, hey, you're gonna win this.
We didn't know, like we had no idea. I got an email saying like, hey, can you hop on a call? And then they're like, you're nominated for an Apple Design Award. And I was like, what? The app's been out for 2 weeks. Like, seriously? So we were in total shock and awe. And it was incredible. And then once you win one, you're on the radar. So that definitely helped. And but still, I will admit, when we got the call last year that we were nominated for an App Store award for one of the best apps in the world, we were just as shocked. Like, because it's the kind of thing you don't like. Winning one is already crazy. Winning two is just so unexpected to the point where we were like, what? Like, what do you mean we can have two? Like, so I think, yeah, it's really, there's no secret. Like, it's not like a secret formula. There's no number to call. Like, you just have to make something really, really good and do whatever you can to get them to notice it. And I think one of the best ways to do that is like through networking and press, because they are looking.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of nailed the networking side. Getting press. How do you get press? I'm like a founder, never gotten anyone to cover or write about no news stories about my startup. How would you approach just getting your first piece of press? And then is there a strategy to like keep it going? You've gotten a lot of pretty good press for Pok Pok over the last couple of years. So just take us inside how you do it.
I listened to your episode with
Eric Newcomer.
Yes, that's a great episode for people to listen to if they want to learn how to do this from like a journalist point of view. Happy to share mine. So it's goes back to the networking thing, but for me, one of the biggest things was if you have something that's not on the market yet, what a really powerful thing to do is to get journalists looped in early to get feedback. For example, you're making a fitness app. Reach out to a bunch of influencers and press who cover fitness and tell them, hey, I'd love your feedback. I'm going to give you a free like beta of the app. What do you think? Like, I'd love to just hear your thoughts for 20 minutes.
So you're not pitching them. You're just
You're
giving
not
them.
pitching them. You're just
Yep.
showing them. And then what you get is this beautiful thing where if they give you feedback, you reply, they give you more feedback, they reply, you launch an update, they give you more feedback. And suddenly, when it's time to launch your product, they feel like they helped you make it and they feel ownership over it and they want to help promote it. So that was one really powerful thing that we did with Pok Pok, especially with influencers. And then the other thing is if you already have a product on the market, you can do something similar, but most journalists are like allergic to that because they kind of catch it. So I would say the best thing to do is to start the networking early. So again, read a bunch of stuff that they've written, find things that are genuinely interesting to you, write them, let them know you read their piece, you loved it, why you loved it, and don't ask for anything. That's it. They're going to answer you because everyone loves compliments, like I said. So when they reply, you're like, cool, no problem. And then if you feel like it's the right moment, you can do a quick PS. This is what I'm working on. Like, you might find it interesting based on the thing you wrote last week. If you don't feel like the time is right, or you don't have a hook for them or an angle to cover, then I would say nothing. But then, a few months later, hit them again. Hey, I just saw you wrote about that. I really like this one too. And by the way, I'm working on this. Like, so finding the moment to hit them, but I wouldn't waste that chance with no news. Like, telling them you have a company is not news. Like, it's just not. No one gives a shit. So you have to have the angle, and you have to know the beat of the journalist really well. If you pitch the journalist something that's not on their beat, they'll ignore you for the rest of their career, probably, because you
Oh
wasted their time.
no.
Like, if
Okay.
you I mean, it's a bit harsh, but like,
Yeah, it's
if
kind of
you
true.
if you cover parenting and you pitch me Banana Capital, I'd be like, "What?" Like, but you'd have to, if you pitched me Banana Capital because you invested in Pok Pok and there's a story there, that's different.
Yeah, my kids helped me do diligence on this company that I
Exactly.
invested in.
That's a beautiful we got to pitch that around. Um
Yeah. Well, that's part of the I think one of the stories on the Series A was like Nico at Adjacent who led. He's like, I've been doing diligence for 2 years. My kid helped me like suss this one out.
but honestly, I don't know if you noticed, like, I tweeted about it, and like, I would say like 60-70% of our investors in this round were all parents whose kids have been using Pok Pok. Like Brandon Leonardo from Instacart, but before I even met him, his son was using Pok Pok. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, yeah, it's funny, but those are the stories journalists kind of love. Like, so that's my approach. It's like relationship building early, just complimenting their work, reading their work, staying up to date. Like, part of my homework every week as a founder is reading the news because I see like who's covering what, who switched jobs, following them on Twitter, and keeping an eye out, honestly, and sharing them other news that might not be your news but that you think they might care about is also kind of cool. Like, if you see a piece that you think that they would really love, just ping them with it. I mean, then there's the obvious, like, more formal pitching that can be done. And I think that's a whole other podcast probably. But like, the sort of TLDR there would be just like, yeah, have a really good angle for the right journalist and get right to the point. And then, yeah, I mean, like, some of the relationships we have with like TechCrunch, who did the exclusive on our Series A, like, I'm very grateful to say, but it was literally one email. Hey, it's me. Do you want to cover this? Yeah, cool.
You already had a relationship?
Yeah, so Sarah Perez, who wrote the piece, has been covering Puck Puck since we started the company. So I knew, like, she's gonna be my first call. And like, her house burned down a few months ago. And like, when I saw that on Twitter, like, I messaged her. I mean, it was insane. And like, thank God her kids were okay and everything. But like, when you care about these people as people, not just as like the thing that they can do for you, I think it goes a really long way. If you happen to know a journalist's birthday and you remember, that kind of thing goes a long way too. So just trying to keep them in your CRM, like, treat them like you would a friend, and hopefully they'll take care of you when you have news.
Well, cuz so it sounds like you almost treat it like a process. Like you have a spreadsheet or some kind of mechanism of tracking and you just stay up to date. And like it's a very intentional thing. You're not just like, shoot, I need press. We're announcing the Series A next week. Let's just message some people. It's like you're thinking about this months ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure. I have a very big spreadsheet I've had for my entire career, and I do keep it updated. Not all the time. Like, there are seasons of press for us just because like we don't do it full time, but yeah, we do pay close attention, and before we reach out to anyone, we recheck them to make sure they still work at the place we thought they did and cover the thing they think we do, because it does change.
The another thing I thought was really interesting, just about the story of Pok Pok, how you kind of around PR and press around this round, you raised it was a $7 million, $6 million Series A, but you specifically had something that you intentionally did putting the round together. Can you just kind of talk about what that was, why it was important, and then how you did it?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. So yeah, we are very fortunate in this round to be almost finished the fundraise within a couple of weeks, but it occurred to Esther and I, who, her and I really run the day to day of the company, that we had no women coming into this round. And we've always had women on the cap table. So we pitched a bunch of women. It just didn't happen to work out with some. And the round was filling fast, and we realized like if we don't make a move now, we're going to be closed without any women. And it was a really hard decision because this market is not an easy one. And we had so much momentum and we were essentially oversubscribed. And then we decided though we just couldn't do it. We had to make room for women. So we decided to make a few allocation changes, and we did a first close because we didn't want to lose our momentum and we didn't want to hold up the big process of it all. But then we set aside just a few $100,000 to prioritize female investment for. And we were really grateful that our board and Nico, who was leading the round from Adjacent, were all super supportive of this. And you were very supportive as well. You made intros, and Michelle ended up investing, and she came through you. So thank you again. And it was just, yeah, it was just really important. Like this is a women led company. Our core customer are moms. And yeah, we have to make the sacrifice to take the leap, I think sometimes. And it would have been really easy to just close it up and kind of forget about it and not mention it. And no one would probably even notice or say anything, but like we would know. And I think a huge part of pushing like venture capital forward in general, and the like lack of equity and cash that go to women is so insane. Like it's 2% right now, like in the entire world of venture capital dollars that go to women. We just have to change that. And I think a huge part of changing it is having more women be able to invest. So we did do it. It took way longer than filling the like $5+ million just to find women to fill a few 100,000. I think the biggest blocker was that so many women tend to tap out their investments at seed stage. So there are a lot of fantastic female run VCs, but they tend to live in the pre-seed to seed stage. A lot of angel investors who are women also tend to invest up to about seed, and then they tend to sort of tap out. And I think the biggest challenge is wealth gap. And so during this entire process, I confided in our fractional CFO, Julie McGill, who's been an incredible tool for us internally, but also sort of a mentor to me. And she was like, Melissa, I've been living this for my entire career. She's also an LP in a bunch of funds and has been doing investing her whole career. And she's like, you know what? I've been thinking for years that I want to do something about this, because you're absolutely right. A lot of women stop investing past seed, and we have to change that.
It's like the dollar amount almost, just the numbers get so big that it's just harder to stack them up.
Exactly. It's harder to get in because you can't. I had so many wonderful women and strategic women offer me $10,000 checks. But at a $6 million round, it's very hard to take a $10,000 check. So yeah, Julie was like, you know what? I'm starting a fund. And that was really cool. I mean, Julie's wanted to do this for a little while, but she didn't have the right deal in place. She didn't have the right catalyst. And so we talked about it for a while and realized like this is the right moment. So Julie started a brand new fund specifically to bring more women into investing at Series A and beyond. And it's called the Julie Change Fund, and Pok Pok was their first investment. So she had to scramble to get all the paperwork in order for her to participate because, yeah, she had to start an entirely new fund just to invest. But I'm so excited that this exists and that Pok Pok was able to be the catalyst for it, because it's going to help continue to fuel sort of the next generation of female founders forward and widen the opportunity for women investors to invest beyond seed and learn what it takes to invest at growth stage and really see like what those differences are. And so hopefully this will become a bit of a flywheel where more female founders will have very successful exits who can then sort of like reinvest in the ecosystem through funds like the Julie Change Fund. So it was a really incredible experience. I'm so happy we held out for it. And even though it took a few extra months and a lot of late nights, yeah, I feel really good about the decision.
Yeah, I'm glad to be a part of it too. Glad I could help.
Thank you. You did. You're wonderful. You've been super helpful.
I guess like another thing I really wanted to hit on, it's a little bit of a different topic, but just staying creative inside of, kind of like a maybe more rigid industry inside of a startup. Like, how do you keep kind of introducing these new concepts? Like, you're kind of always coming up with new ideas that are, there's not really a playbook for digital toys per se. Just How do you guys stay just, like I said, creative with all these different constraints?
I think the biggest thing is the culture on our team. We have to invest in it kind of more than anything else because we need that creative culture to create these crazy ideas that we're making. So it's really about just making space for it. And a part of the reason why we raised money too was to give our creative team a little more flex so that they can, not be working at 105% every day, but maybe 98%. So they have a few more percentages to think outside of the box and rest their brains and spend more time outside coming up with ideas. So I think a big part of it is just like how we practice the day to day and making sure that there's always space to be creative. The other thing is our sort of internal mantra, which is best idea wins. So anyone on the team, whether they're on the development and creative team or not, can come up with an idea for Pok Pok toy. And we take that all very seriously, and we do a lot of kind of company wide jamming to cultivate that and encourage it. The other thing we do is every month we have what we call Black Box Day.
Black Box Day.
Yes. So it's usually the last Friday of the month. You put a big black box over your whole calendar. You're unavailable. You're not allowed to do any of your day to day work, but you must do something for Pok Pok as a company. So if you're a designer, that can be spending the day at a museum. It could be going to a toy store. It could be working on a new idea for a toy that you just haven't had time to get around to. We had one of our marketers build like an AI crawler that took all of the reviews on the App Store and spat out tons of different insights. We've had people like literally do crazy things, like anything goes. And then at 3 o'clock that day, we all meet up and talk about and share like what we black boxed and what we came up with. And so sometimes you're working on things for multiple months, and other times it's just like a quick one off thing like, oh, I've always wanted to like optimize my inbox and like I finally got around to it. So sometimes it's a little more boring, but generally speaking, we get a lot of cool ideas, and it's mostly toy related stuff. So we try to carve out one day a month for that, and it's becoming like a really cool tradition. We've been doing it now for over a year, and the team really likes it. And then the other thing too, I guess, is just trying to spend a lot of time with kids. So many of us on the team have kids, but many of us don't have kids. So really just making sure we all have time to be like with our core users and like learn about what they're into right now and where the obstacles are and what they're playing with. And it's no fun at all.
And then I feel like you've done a pretty good job just generally with like influencer strategy. Maybe that's similar to press and reporters, but how have you kind of found what works best just in terms of like cultivating influencer? Maybe it's like organic. I know you've done some paid, but just like broadly speaking, what's been the strategy that you found has worked best there?
In the early days, it was a lot of similar outreach like we do for press. So it was just giving Pok Pok away. But when you're competing against other kids brands who are giving these mom influencers like $5,000 crib combos, like it's a little app is like just not as sexy, honestly. So we had to come up with other things. So we've done a lot of things. One of our biggest sort of hacks, which I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, and hopefully someone listening gets something out of this. So we knew we wanted educational advisors for Pok Pok from the beginning, and we always have them, and they're fantastic. And it's only good sense to make sure that those people have their own communities because, of course, like the more followers, the better. So we started looking for educational advisors who could also be influencers in the future. So we reached out to a good handful before we even launched the app and asked them to advise on Pok Pok. An advisory rate is much lower than an influencer deal. So we were paying in the hundreds of dollars instead of in the thousands of dollars for influencers to help us with our app, like genuinely be super helpful. And we got a lot out of that. But then when we launched the app, they were so proud to say that they worked on it with us that they would just promote it for free. And we got a ton of support through that in the early days. And then we sort of turned those relationships into affiliate deals. Many of them we work with consistently where we'll they're no longer necessarily consulting on a regular basis, but they've given us this sort of like deal of sorts where, we'll pay them for content, but nowhere near what other people are paying them for content because they have this like sweet spot for Pok Pok. So that was a really great way to do it in the early days. And now we do both a combination of organic and paid. And I think the best thing that we did was just test really fast and test a wide variety of people, because it's one thing to be like, oh, they're an influencer, they have 500,000 followers, but like, who are those followers? Are they engaged? We made a lot of mistakes early on with the wrong people, thinking like that it would work, and it didn't. So
What were some of the mistakes?
a lot of mom influencers whose core audience were more like nutrition, health, wellness. So people who are like famous on Instagram for their fitness workouts or their recipes, but also happen to be moms, like though those followers are not there for the mom content, they're there for the fitness content. So we realized pretty quickly like the niche, the audience has to be there for the parenting. We tried to work with a lot of dads. We still do once in a while, but none of them have really panned out for us. Unfortunately, like the audience just doesn't convert as well. And I think it's because so many of the decision makers in the household for anything for the kids still tends to be the mom. And I even had like VCs when I was pitching be like, oh, cool. Like, I'll ask my wife about this. I'm like, why don't you just open it up and check it? Like, you're the dad, you have authority to do that.
That is true. I do that more than I would like to admit.
Yeah. So, see, I mean, women do kind of run the world.
Yeah, I think it's like 70% of consumer spending in the US is driven by women. Even if it might be flipped in terms of like income or wealth, or whatever, like women generally drive a lot of the purchasing decisions.
Even my husband, hey, should I buy these shoes? Like, just buy the shoes if you like the shoes.
I don't know. I'm like, what do you think? You're my wife. Like you're the one that looks at me wearing this. What's your opinion?
Yeah, so we made a lot of mistakes. We also overpaid on a lot of things. We like fell for the name and we're like, oh, they're going to be huge, but like actually no one cared. I think finding a niche was super important. So we've spent a lot of time like at sort of the top of the funnel when it came to like parenting education creators, and then we really like niched down, and now we work with a lot of like Montessori only creators or homeschooling creators or parent hack creators. Like we found these kind of niches that work really well for Pok Pok, and now we're living in there. And the other thing I would say is the very first early experiments that I literally just did from my desk by myself, I didn't do enough work to track any of them. Like I was so busy doing a million other things. I just kind of signed the deal and was like, cool, like hope this pans out. And we saw a boost, and I'm like, great, we saw a boost, but I didn't really spend time calculating real ROI, tracking like what worked in that video versus what worked in this video. Because I just didn't have the bandwidth for it. And I wanted to do a bit of early testing kind of before we raised a lot of money. But now I see that that was probably a waste of time. I think if you're going to do it, you have to be tracking every single thing and make sure you're taking away a learning from everything, because many of them won't work for sure. You're going to waste thousands of dollars, but it's not actually a waste if you've learned something. It's only a waste if you do it and don't spend time understanding why it went wrong. So now we have a very formulaic approach to everything that we do with influencers. We prepare them vigilantly. We sign very detailed agreements. We post-mortem every single one. We look at why we think it worked, why we think it didn't work, so that we can either like duplicate it or get away from it. And now we've created a much more well-oiled machine to try to duplicate the successes and avoid the failures.
And then how well has it worked? I don't know what you're saying publicly in terms of just like the current state of Pok Pok is a business, but what would you kind of, I guess, like the highlights that you're willing to share?
Yeah, I can share a few things. So, well, in 2023, we 5x'd our user base. We had a really incredible year. We have well over a million downloads now. And I think for us, like we're not really sharing revenue or anything like that at this point, but I can tell you that like we are growing at a really strong pace. And something that we're working on now as a company is actually pulling back a little bit on the gas pedal, where we were growing really healthily, but we were letting a few things I would say, like, slide through that weren't always fully profitable because we wanted to hit those growth milestones. And now we're sort of switching gears a little bit. So we want to make sure that everything that we're doing is profitable and we're growing really as healthily as we can to build ourselves that like long-term future. So it's been a really fun experiment actually to see how that changes things. We're also making changes to the way we update content, how often we do it, what kinds of content we're making. We're really excited to start working on some STEM specific toys later this year, which are going to really scratch the itch for parents who are eager for a little bit more of that like classroom subject style learning, but without the rote memorization regurgitation model. So yeah, there's a lot coming for Pok Pok still, but we're doing great. And I think yeah, it's always a roller coaster at any startup, but I'm very happy to say today we're at the top of the mountain.
Amazing. I hope you're not at the top yet. As an investor, I hope there's.
Not like the ultimate summit, but like it's how like some days you're just in the valley at the bottom, and then other days you're like, okay, I'm back up. And it's just and like the real top is like you can't even see it right now. It's like above the clouds because we definitely haven't peaked at all. But like there are days where everything just goes wrong and you're like, we're screwed.
But you're in a phase where things are at least going well. You're excited about
Things
stuff.
are going well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any ways that Pop Cook's turned out differently, or starting a company has turned out differently than you would have thought going into it?
Yeah, I think as a founder, I mean, it can be so romanticized, this whole thing, this whole industry. It's really not. Like it's really not that romantic and sexy. Like it's really grueling and hard and exhausting. And I knew it would be difficult, but I think I underestimated just how high the highs are and how low the lows can be. There's just so many extremes. And, on social media and on LinkedIn, people just see the highlight reel, obviously. And some people share more of the lows, but I think it's really can be a very grueling thing. And I think what's helped me always is knowing that everyone else has gone through the same journey of crazy shit and usually it works out if you keep your head up and you stay focused. So I think that's been one thing that I didn't expect to feel as heavily as I feel. Like some days it's like euphoria. Like I'm the smartest person on earth. I created the most perfect company. Everything's fantastic. And then it's like, I'm an idiot. Who put me in charge of this business? We are failing. These are like two obviously like very extreme examples, but I think the volatility I think of the emotional roller coaster of running a company is very intense and should not be underestimated. But on the positive side, I think one thing I didn't expect was the impact. Like I knew what we were building was important and would be really enriching and educational for families, but I could have never imagined the feeling of knowing that it makes such a difference for kids. Like we've had so many stories from families about like how it's helped their children overcome like crazy obstacles, or like one autistic boy was terrified of lights until he learned how to use the busy board in Pok Pok, and now he does all the lights in the house and can use all the switches. And we've had one boy in Australia who has leukemia and he's been hospitalized for months and they can't bring him any more toys. And like Pok Pok is the thing that he uses every day that gets him through treatments and sitting in a hospital bed. And like there's just when you think about the stigma around screen time, I think people forget like the reality of life. Like if you're a bedridden cancer patient and you're 4, like you do whatever it takes to keep your kid happy. And like I just think, yeah, there's so much hidden impact in all of the work that we do. And there's a lot of very clear impact, of course, but I never could have imagined the types of stories that would come out of this and just, yeah, the difference we would be able to make in the world. So that feels great. And no matter how crazy the roller coaster gets, that's what always keeps us very level headed and very focused on the goal.
Yeah, it sounds like you cling to the highs to help get you through the lows.
I mean, yeah, who doesn't? It must be similar for you.
I think so. Yeah. I think I'm pretty good at like shock absorbing. I'm probably notorious for like not embracing the highs and not letting the lows. Like instead of being like a roller coaster, it's just more of a line.
It's just flat. You're flatlined.
Like maybe there's like a slight bump or like there's like a little hole, but yeah, I'm like I stay a lot more level headed. I feel like just a lot more neutral, just generally. which I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. My wife would say that I can lean into the emotions a little bit more, which I definitely try to do. But I think naturally, I just tend to like stay a little bit more in the middle.
Life's a journey.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and yeah, I'm excited for people to listen to it.
Thank you for having me. I hope it ended up being an interesting conversation for you and for everybody else, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Peel. If you want to support the show, share this episode with a friend and check out our wonderful sponsors in the show notes. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes, and you'll get new ones plus the transcripts in your inbox every week. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.
Hey everyone, Eric here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at ericaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.